Hey guys, this is 80s Child, aka Lisa, coming at you from, guess what? An honest to goodness laptop. That's right, folks. An honest to goodness laptop and not the computer room that I can no longer use because of the quarantine. So, I know it's been a while. I had promised you guys some videos for my, 80s reviews, but I've kind of had to put that on the back burner for the time being because I don't have a lot of props. I've got a couple of things, but not many, and I can have a hard time going out to get them, again, because of the quarantine. So while I've been sitting around for this quarantine, I've done a lot of binge watching. A lot of binge watching I wasn't expecting. Because after I finished the Suits reviews, I was kind of burned out, and I didn't want to do any reviews for a little while. I wanted to just kind of relax, enjoy the new seasons of shows, and the holidays, and things like that. And life got really busy, got a new job, was constantly at work and too exhausted to really do any video work. But now I don't have a whole lot to do because of the quarantine and my job being closed, so I'm kind of stuck. So yes, I did a lot of binge watching, and I binge watched some things that I did not expect to binge watch, stuff that I hadn't watched in probably, oh God, the better part of half a decade. One of those being Doctor Who. Yes, 80s Child is definitely a Whovian. I have a very complicated relationship with Doctor Who, and I will say I have not properly watched the show all the way through since probably, 6 years? Maybe 2014, right around just after Day of the Doctor, probably. I will explain to you why. My first doctor, I can't say he was my first doctor because I didn't watch it all the way through, but when I was a kid, I distinctly remember seeing episodes with a couple episodes here and there with Tom Baker on PBS when it would run on late night. This was a long time ago when I was a kid. But I was too young to really associate what the show was about and to really grasp the concepts because I was, as I said, just a kid. So I really wouldn't consider him my doctor, but he was the first one that I, with my eyeballs visually saw on the screen. And then, of course, in 1996, I saw the Fox movie. And that's when I realized, oh, wait, okay, now I remember Doctor Who. I won't say it was the best idealization of Doctor Who in the world, but I will say Paul McGann was born to play this role. And I still feel like he did not get enough of a showing in the Day of the Doctor. And if Eccleston didn't want to do it, they should have just given it, instead of the War Doctor, they should have just let it be Paul McGann, because the dude was born to play the role. Anyhow, so the movie wasn't that great, but I enjoyed it for what it was. And I didn't think too much of it after that. And then 2005 happened, and oh my God, Doctor Who just showed up. Thanks to our Lord on High creator, Russell T Davies. He brought Doctor Who back to a new audience in 2005. And after that, I was down the Who trash can, as it were. My doctors firmly are Doctor 9 and 10, Eccleston and Tennant, most especially Tennant. Tennant is my doctor, and he will always be. Not just because I'm a David Tennant fan, but also because he was the best doctor that ever lived. And I know that the creators of the show believed this as much because there was a lot of trepidation on the set from what I have heard and read towards the end of season 4, after David had gone public and announced that he wasn't coming back after season 4. A lot of the producers and writers were wondering if it was even worth it to keep going on, because he was so ingrained in the public consciousness as the Doctor, and he was so amazing as the Doctor. He literally was the Doctor, and no one was sure if the show could go on without him. Not just him, but Russell and Julie and Phil. The whole backbone, the lifeblood of the show. But we got a new showrunner and a new doctor, 2010, and that was Steven Moffat and Matt Smith. Now, I will say that when David Tennant left at the End of Time Part 2, I was heartbroken, like, really. And yes, this is 10 years ago. You would think a person would have moved on by now, but he is so inundated in my heart as the Doctor. I don't think I will ever move on from him. And sitting here watching the old episodes of the first 4 seasons, it was such an emotional experience for me, because I did not realize how much I missed them. How much I missed Chris and David and Billy and Freema and Catherine and John and Camille and Noel and everybody that was involved. All those old episodes that were so emotionally moving still brought me to tears. Doomsday and Army of Ghosts and Turn Left and Stolen Earth, Journey's End, you know. You have to understand, I hadn't watched the first 4 seasons in probably, over 10 years. I mean, after he left, I just didn't have it in me to rewatch the old ones. It hurt too much to see him. That's why to this day, other than the first time I saw the 11th Hour, which was the premiere of Matt Smith, I have not watched it since. Like that particular episode, because I cannot, in my heart, watch him running around for 50 minutes wearing Ten's raggedy, taggedy old suit. It's like, to me, he's wearing the bones of Ten on his body the whole time, and it breaks my heart to see it. It's too emotional. Anyway, I was skeptical at first because, I mean, you know, Ten was so huge. But because it was Steven Moffat, and we all know that Moffat has written some of the best episodes of the Russell T. Davies era, Empty Child, The Doctor Dances, The Girl in the Fireplace, Blink, Silence in the Library, The Forest of the Dead. He had good cred, you know. He had really amazing cred as a great writer. So, and he was a massive Doctor Who fan. He understood the franchise and the character. So I felt, okay, this could work. So I made a promise to myself that I would at least watch the first season of Moffat's era and see how it went. And if it was good enough, then I would give it a chance and keep going. Season 5 wasn't too bad. It still had that adventurous sci-fi quality, some really good monsters, some good plot lines. The overarching storyline wasn't too in your face. It wasn't too confusing. And Matt Smith did a good job. He still had that dynamic quality of who the Doctor is, that mixture of childlike, adventurous, manic, but wise, and also dark at the same time. So he would never be 10. He'll never be 10, but he got it. I won't say that I was as attached to him or to Amy and Rory as 10 as I was to 10 and the companions there. To this day, I still cry over Donna because it's so sad. Anyway, but I was okay with it. And I thought, okay, if the future seasons continue going as season 5 has, then I think I think we'll be okay, because season 5 was Moffat finding his footing, right? So if he's okay with this one, then future seasons should be okay. And then season 6 happened. And it was just a slow progression from there. As I said in the past, Steven Moffat is a good writer on his own when he does singular episodes. But writing and show running are two different things. And show running is not something he particularly excels at. Not to disparage Steven Moffat personally, but he has a little bit of a god complex. And he, instead of developing the companions more in relation to how they relate to the Doctor and how their lives are benefited from traveling with him. It was more about the mysteries of the Doctor, who he is, what is his name, why is he him. And that's something that's continued to bring the show down a little bit in quality, I think. I mean, production values, bar none, has not been a problem. Obviously, as years have gone by, CG quality has gone up. You would expect that as technology gets better. But to sacrifice story for CG and to sacrifice story for production values is not a good idea. And Moffat's desire to make these overarching storylines that are just huge and epic and all-encompassing lack the subtlety that made Russell's so grandiose and so well thought out because of the subtlety. Moffat doesn't have that ability. It's like ride or die, basically. And by the time you get to the finale, it's so like this that the storyline is so confusing that you're not really there to watch the storyline anymore because you wouldn't grasp it anyway. You're just there for the big boom boom, like the big action stuff. So, yeah. I had some issues with season 6, most especially with River Song, and that her whole storyline just was nonsensical to me completely from start to finish. Now, this might be primarily because I virulently dislike her. I know most people think she's the greatest thing since sliced fucking bread, but I don't like her. I probably would have liked her more if she wasn't so tied to the Doctor, but I kind of knew when she showed up it wouldn't matter because of what Moffat had already introduced her as in Silence of the Library, and that's where I started disliking her, period. But yeah, her whole storyline just convoluted everything. By the time it got to the end where he was shot, or even though it wasn't really him, it was a robot or whatever, what the hell it was, I was kind of like, I'm done. So at that point, I would say I was pretty much watching Doctor Who out of a sense of obligation. Season 7 was even worse. Primarily because it was cut into two distinct, like 7A and 7B, which was not a good idea. The stories were completely self-contained, so there was no overarching plot line, even in a subtle way that linked one story to the next. I did think that the Angels in Manhattan storyline where Rory and Amy Lee was very well done, and the Christmas special was also very good. I will applaud Matt Smith on how well he played that grief of losing them and just not wanting to travel or be with anybody anymore. That was well done. And I also agree with a lot of fans that wish that the Clara we got was the one from the Christmas episode instead of the modern day one. So, I gotta tell you, by the time Clara came, I was wondering why the hell I was still watching. Because watching out of a sense of obligation, it's not enough of a reason. But I was hoping beyond hope that it would improve. I figured, okay, old companion's gone, new companion here, maybe we'll try. But yeah, nope. It didn't really get any better. I don't remember very much of season 8, to be honest with you. I just remember the Christmas special where he shows up at her parents' place naked. Okay, I have issues with how Moffat treats his female characters, but that's a whole other video entirely. The point is, by the time I got to the end of season 8, I was well and thoroughly done. Because at season 8 was when we had the Day of the Doctor. They had the 50th anniversary episode, and even though, yes, the episode was really good, I just didn't like how they retconned a lot of the Time War storyline, which to me felt like they were making 9 and 10's post-traumatic stress, the grief, the guilt, everything they felt seemed worthless because in reality it never actually happened. It's only a memory that they believed happened. All of that amazing character growth, all of that pain and everything that the two previous versions of the Doctor went through, it just was like Moffat was just throwing it down the crapper by saying, "Oh, don't worry, clean slate. It's not real. They just think it is." Like, honestly. But then again, by the time we got to that point in the show, I was having serious problems with the way that Matt Smith was playing the character to begin with. He was all flappy hands and childlike glee, like he was a 5-year-old child. Yeah, I pretty much had enough. Them describing him as the man who forgets was apt. Very apt. So, right around after the Day of the Doctor 50th anniversary special, I kind of just checked out. And I didn't really watch season 9 at all, except for the last 3 episodes, because I knew that she was leaving, that she was going to die. So I wanted to see how they were going to handle it, and I also knew that she's supposed to go back to Gallifrey. So I wanted to see how Capaldi would handle that. I mean, I watched it up until Matt Smith regenerated into Capaldi, and I did watch the entire first season of Capaldi. He was okay, but a little too alien for my liking. I mean, when you've got a doctor that literally has to, like, use index cards with pre-written responses to know what to say to other people because he doesn't know how to interact. Yeah, that's a little too much for me. I know that 9 and 10 and even 11 had their quirks, but he was severely lacking in the humanity. I didn't like it. So, yeah. By the time we got to the end of season 8, I kind of thoroughly checked out. And, yeah, season 9, I only watched the last 3 episodes just to see how they would handle him returning to Gallifrey. I did not think... I mean, Heaven Sent was really, really good. Hellbent was kind of ridiculous, because... they could have handled that a lot better. I mean, we're talking about going back to Gallifrey, and you send Rassilon, Lord President Rassilon, who was played by Timothy Dalton in End of Time Part 1 and 2. Did y'all miss that? Like, how that was played? Who was going to literally end the universe as we know it. Turned into whoever was playing him in this case, in Hellbent, and running off with his tail between his legs. Just because the doctor said you suck. Like, what? So, yeah. After that, I just kind of turned it off and was not caring anymore. So I did not see season 10 at all. And I have not watched the new season 11 or 12 with Jodie. I've only watched 2 episodes, and I only did that because I wanted to see for myself, like, what was the... I can't give opinions on the show without seeing at least an episode or 2 to understand what the issues are. So, as of late, I've been reading a lot of articles about season 11 and 12, about Jodie. I knew when the announcement was made. I mean, just because I wasn't watching the show doesn't mean I wasn't keeping up on the news. When I heard the announcement that a female doctor was going to be Dr. 13. Okay. Before people start flaming me, I don't care that she's a female. I honest to God, don't. I'm not, a Nick Beard. I'm not a social justice warrior. I mean, I do believe in social justice issues, but, Doctor Who is beyond that. Doctor Who should not be involving social justice. Doctor Who should just be Doctor Who. I don't want to be lectured to, I want to be entertained. So as long as the storylines were good and she played it well, I didn't care. Oh boy, but what we got. I knew that it was going to be divisive from the jump. Because the Doctor has always been a man from the beginning. So it was going to be hard for people to come around to it. And it still has been. We're 2 seasons in, and the fandom is thoroughly divided. Cracked, basically. There are some members of the fandom that think she's great, and there are a lot of members of the fandom that think she sucks. I have no ill will against Jodie Whittaker at all. I have seen her in Broadchurch. She is a fantastic actress. And I think if she had been given better scripts and more to work with, she might have had a better idea. I watched a couple of interviews with her. People asking her how she was approaching playing the Doctor, because each actor that comes into the role, they have to develop how they believe the Doctor's personality will be, because each personality is different. You've seen that from Hartnell to Troughton to Pertwee, Baker. You know, each of them plays the Doctor in their own specific way. And that makes them unique. Jodie, unfortunately, her problem is, I don't know if it's just that she hasn't done the research, or she's just going off of whatever Chibnall gives her, because her Doctor is not unique. From the clothing she wears to the way she acts, it's like she spends more time pulling from past Doctors than she does developing her own version of the Doctor in her own right. That's a failing. So, after season 10, Moffat bowed out and Chris Chibnall came in. Now, I know who Chris Chibnall is. I recognize his name because I know he's written quite a few episodes for Doctor Who in the past. They've not all been good ones, and I know you're going to disagree with me, but I actually like 42. I thought that was a very good episode. I mean, not spectacular and oh my god, but I liked the pacing. I thought it was like really, but yeah, his episodes are kind of hit or miss, but mostly miss. So I was definitely kind of surprised, because you would think a franchise of this nature, that is pretty much a British staple, an institution, if you will, would want to be sure that whoever comes in to take over their show next knows what they're doing. Not only I would request that they be I don't necessarily care if they're a fan. What I care about is that that the person is a good writer and a good showrunner, both. Chibnall is neither. Now, I will not profess to know what is going through the BBC's mind right now, because I don't live in England, so I don't know what their deal is, but I do know some of the things I've seen in the United States on shows, so I can understand the concerns that a lot of Who fans are having about social justice invading this franchise. I get it. So I wanted to see for myself with my own eyeballs just what everybody was getting at. So I watched 2 episodes. I watched Rosa and I watched Arachnids in the UK, because I was interested to see what their take would be on Rosa Parks and this whole idea of this Trump stand-in. I was kind of shocked that they managed to get Chris Noth to come in to play the Trump stand-in. I know Chris Noth very well from Law and Order. I was like, how in the world? Well, money talks, I guess. So, yeah, it didn't take me long. Not more than maybe 5 minutes in to Rosa before I started to see exactly what the issues were. Beyond the fact that Jodie is having a very difficult time making this Doctor her own, and kind of doesn't riff well off of the companions, when Eccleston was there, when Tennant was there especially, and I'll even say Matt Smith, you knew that he considered that person family. And whenever they were having a hard time, or whenever something bad happened to them, or whenever they were in a bad way, the doctor was always there. He was able to, he might not necessarily have been able to relate on a human level, but he was able to be there as a shoulder to cry on, someone to talk to, an understanding ear. This doctor is a sociopath. Like, she doesn't talk to anybody. And when she does, it's just objectively rude. She spends a lot of her time lambasting people, mostly males, and she doesn't seem to have sympathy, or, well, not sympathy, empathy for what the characters are going through. From my understanding of the three companions, Graham lost his wife in the first episode. She was killed when she was trying to stop an alien and she fell off of a tower. She died. He literally lost his wife. And the doctor hasn't really been able to empathize with that at all. But then there's supposed to be a later episode where he has a concern about his cancer possibly coming back. And she's just like, okay. Like, she has no response. So, yeah, I have some issues with the way that she portrays the doctor. I guess the word I would use is neutral. From the outfit, which is completely asexual, there's nothing that she wears that distinguishes her at all as the doctor, whereas the other, you had Tom Baker with his long scarf, you had Peter Davison with his blazer with the orange trim and the little celery stick, you had the circus tent that threw up all over Colin Baker. You had Sylvester McCoy with the umbrella and the straw hat. You had the Victorian look with Paul McGann. Eccleston with his, soldier, simplistic leather jacket. And of course, David Tennant with the geek chic pinstripe suit and the trainers. Even Matt Smith with the bow tie and sometimes that stupid fucking fez. And his tweed coat, If you was to see just the outline of these doctors, you would know immediately which doctor that was. Because of how they are dressed. It defines the character. Jodie, unfortunately, grabbed a couple pieces, or the character grabbed a couple pieces from a thrift store and threw them on. And yeah, it's very neutral looking and doesn't stand out at all. Especially the suspenders that just look absolutely ridiculous on her. I swear, you could swap out the boots for clown shoes and give her a red nose and a red wig and she'd be a freaking clown. I don't know who did the costume design for these 2 seasons, but it needs to be vastly improved. Yes, the production values have gone up. I mean, it's 2020. Of course they've improved. But, again, you're sacrificing storyline for special effects. And it's not worth it. Because you got to a point now where there is no storyline. Every episode is more boring than the one before. The companions have no development. They're just there. Oh, and by the way, at any point in time when the doctor is traveling, he should have no more than 2 companions at any given time, preferably only 1. Because if you have too many companions, then there's not enough storyline given to each one of them to develop as their own character. That's why, inevitably, one of them is going to get sidelined. And in this case, it's usually Yaz. I don't know her that well. Like I said, I've only watched 2 episodes, but from what I've seen in these 2, she doesn't do anything. Graham is the one that's pretty much always front and center. You got Ryan kind of trying, but they don't give him much. And this is the problem when you have too many. Inevitably, 1 or 2 of the companions are going to become the dead weight. If it was just her and Graham, I think it'd be perfect, because the 2 of them play off of each other very well. Sometimes. Unfortunately, she just doesn't have an emotional connection to really anybody. But anyway, yeah. If you was to get rid of Ryan and Yaz and just have Graham, I think the show would be 100 times better. Other issues, the musical score. Murray Gold stayed on all through the Steven Moffat years, and when Moffat left, so did Gold. And with that, he took a whole collection of music with him. So all those important emotional beats that we associate with the characters, the Bad Wolf theme, Rose's theme, Donna's theme, Martha's theme, the Doctor's individual themes, Doomsday theme, all those incredibly, intense emotional beats that we associate with these characters are gone. And now it's just ambient background noise. So when you have these supposedly emotional moments, there's nothing to make it feel emotional or feel epic in scope or scale, because the music is just not there. It's just ambient background tones that you could probably make up on your computer yourself. I mean, I don't know what else to say beyond that. And the biggest problem, I would have to say, is the social justice plot lines, the storylines about the Trump stand-in, pollution, plastics, being against white males, all of this stuff. It's ridiculous, because Doctor Who has always been progressive in its own way, but Doctor Who, the way that Russell wrote his progressiveness was subtle. You knew it was there, but it wasn't in your face, and he wasn't preaching to you. He wasn't trying to teach you a lesson or lecture to you, which is what Chibnall is having 13 do now in these episodes. She's literally has the 3 of them standing there while she's giving them a lecture about what's going on screen about Rosa Parks. That's not what this show was about. I understand that Sidney Newman did it at first in 1963 for a couple of weeks, but even he realized 50, almost 60 years ago that way of doing the show does not work. That's why they abandoned it rather quickly in favor of the whole overarching sci-fi adventure, because it was a hell of a lot better. So, yeah. I don't know what else to say beyond that. It's like, I did not watch season 12 at all, but I have seen quite a few clips of the Timeless Children, and oh my god, I don't even know what to say at this point, because talk about biting the hand that feeds you. First of all, Sacha Dhawan as the Master, I don't even know how he's even still alive. Unless he got spit out there after End of Time Part 2, I can only assume. But, I mean, what? Yeah, I know John Sim played him as kind of crazy pants, but Sacha Dhawan's portrayal of him is just off the wall insanity. The reason why the earlier incarnations of the Doctor were so good, I'm not even talking about what he was in the movie. Let's just ignore that. But Delgado and, the ones from Baker era and John Sim and even Missy, because Missy wasn't that bad. There was insanity there, but it was subtle and intuitive and dark. It wasn't, I'm a nutter and I'm flailing, and I'm crazy, and I'm gonna burn you to the fucking ground. Yeah, I know John Sims' version had his moments, but there were reasons for that, which Russell made apparent with the sound that was in his brain that the Time Lords put there. Once that was gone, he went back to being that same darkly sinister master that he used to be. Sacha Dhawan's version, I don't even know. But Timeless Children? Absolutely not. That. How are you going to take 57 years worth of history and throw it down the shitter? Like, seriously, how are you going to do that? 57 years worth of history down the shitter. I don't even know what to say. Now, the Doctor is not an eccentric old man or woman who travels throughout space and time in a blue box having adventures. Now he's Space Jesus, apparently, who is the founder of his race, even though they're not actually his race, because he's now not even Gallifreyan, even though he has 2 hearts, like a Gallifreyan. Yeah. And can regenerate an infinite number of times. So the whole drama behind will he use up his regeneration cycle and what's going to happen when he reaches his end, yeah, there's no more drama there. Because he can just regenerate infinitely now. What? Oh, and now the Gallifreyans apparently are horrible people who took a child and murdered her over and over and over again to steal her ability to regenerate and give it to themselves, and built their whole race up from that. And the Doctor was part of some weird secret Gallifreyan group called the Division that nobody knows about, but she doesn't remember it because her memories were all taken away. What? There are so many plot holes in this bullshit, I can't even begin to start. And I'm not going to get into it because there are dozens and dozens of videos on this on YouTube that explain why it doesn't make sense. You got the fact that Matt Smith, when 11 was about to die, he was given a whole new set of regenerations from the Time Lords. Why would they need to give him that if he can regenerate an infinite number of times? The heretofore unknown incarnation of the Doctor, played by Jo Martin, I think her name is Ruth, she does not call herself Doctor, even though we know that William Hartnell, the first Doctor, called himself Doctor. She doesn't recognize the TARDIS. She claims that she recognizes the TARDIS, but it doesn't make sense because the chameleon circuit wasn't broken until Hartnell landed on Earth in The Unearthly Child in 1963. So prior to that, the TARDIS had its normal chameleon circuit, whatever. So she would not have known that the police box was the TARDIS because before that, it wasn't the police box. The TARDIS had not been on fucking Earth by then until Hartnell stole it. So, yeah, there's a ton and a half of plot lines that make zero sense. And this isn't even, like, including what they did to Gallifrey. I was most pissed off about the fact that they went through all of this storyline to bring Gallifrey back, to bring the Time Lords back. Even though I really don't think that they should have, because the Time Lords at the time were ready to destroy the entire universe and reality itself and, become beings of energy and consciousness. Yeah. That was why the Doctor did what he did, to stop them. So how is bringing them back in any way safe? Anyhow. So the Time Lords, they did all of this to bring the Time Lords back. But then Sacha Dhawan's version of the Master goes and destroys it in one fell swoop by destroying the entire planet. Not just destroying the Citadel and burning the planet to ruin, but then using that death particle whatever it was, to destroy all organic life. So nothing on the planet can ever grow again. Even himself. And if the master somehow manages to find a way to come back after that, I don't even know anymore, because he was still stuck on the planet when the companions and the doctor left. So if the death particle is used, which it was, he's organic. I don't care how many times you can regenerate sun. If organic life is destroyed, you ain't coming back. Period. When the companions and the other humans, the ones that were left over from the ascension of the Cybermen or whatever the hell that was, when they set foot through the portal onto Gallifrey, they looked around and they were like, oh wow, this sucks. I don't even think they realized where they were. And the doctor's reaction to setting foot on Gallifrey and seeing the total mass destruction that the Master has caused, and not really having a reaction to it. This is the woman we're talking about the Doctor here. The Doctor who spent years grieving the loss of his people and seeing himself as a monster for having to destroy them, even though he felt he had no choice. And in desperation, going the long way around 4 billion years just to get the planet back. Then sets foot on it again, sees it completely destroyed and razed to the ground. Oh shit. Like, no real reaction. That's not even to say the reaction of the humans that set foot on the planet for the first time. But you know what? I wouldn't expect them to have a reaction to Gallifrey, because she's never told them about Gallifrey. They have no idea where they're even at, or how significant it is that anyone other than Time Lords is actually setting foot on the fucking planet. Yeah, this show's got problems. So, as I've been keeping up with the news, I've been reading a lot of articles and watching videos, and I know that the other channels have published the articles. Most of them are up to date, but there's one that I recently saw that is fairly new, as of May 9th, Saturday, that just came out. On a news outlet called Arc Digital. So I'm going to show you the article in snippets. Now, granted, this isn't like written by BBC or written by, I think this is written by someone who works for Arc. And they're like I think this person, she's a writer herself, and she's kind of a critic of sorts. So we're going to start with the first picture, and you're going to see it up here. Arc Digital. The 13th Doctor is the new 6th Doctor. Here's why. Jodie Whittaker, the first female Doctor, shares important similarities with the man who got Doctor Who cancelled in the 1980s. And this is written by Hannah Long. She's, like I said, she's kind of a critic, reviewer of sorts. So you can see there is picture Jodie doing what looks like a New York Comic Con panel. So they're comparing her to what happened with Colin Baker, which actually makes a lot of sense, because if you look at it, if you compare how the show has gone so far from 9 to 13, it kind of follows in that same pattern from 4 to 6. The show was in its height during 4 and part of 5, and then towards the end of 5 and into 6, it just started getting worse and worse and worse, until the point where Colin Baker got fired and they brought in Sylvester. But after that, the production value slashed so badly that they couldn't really make up for it, and in the end the show just kind of died a slow death. And that's kind of, it seems, where the show is going from here. So let's go on to the next slide, next part of the article. Jodie Whittaker's entry to Doctor Who was pitched as a bold new direction. The first female Doctor in the show's history, her casting hinted that the new showrunner, Chris Chibnall, was ready to break with orthodoxy and try something fresh. Unfortunately, Chibnall's era of the show has shown itself to largely consist of recycled material. His lack of vision and mimicry of earlier storylines results in a static, shallow product. Absolutely true. If you've watched any of the episodes so far, I haven't watched them, but from the reviews I've seen, a lot of stuff stands out. He has picked the bones of a lot of earlier episodes. I'm not sure what the title of the episode was, but one of the monsters was an obvious... he was obviously stealing from the Runaway Bride, because the villain looked just like the Ragnos from that. Almost every one of the episodes that he writes is kind of along the same line, has to do with the doctor and the companions, and they have only a specific amount of time to do a certain thing. They literally have a timer on a countdown, and if they don't do what they have to do by the end of the countdown, somebody's going to die or some bad thing is going to happen, and it's usually the same rote thing. And it's funny when you consider that back when he was 16 and he did some sort of live show where he was interviewed about his opinion of the direction that the show was going in at the time, that he was saying was becoming stale and repetitive. And that's exactly what he's turned the show into, stale and repetitive. The first season that he worked on, season 11, he said in all the interviews that he did that he made it a point that he wasn't going to bring any old villains or monsters from past seasons in. He wanted it to be clean cut, brand new, everything new, so that if someone came in, they could, brand new to the show, they could use it as a jumping off point. But villains like the Master and the Daleks and the Cybermen, they're the Weeping Angels, these are critical villains and monsters that have made the show the success that it is. So if you don't bring them in, and if you don't want to bring them in, that's one thing, but that means that you have to write villains that can stand up to that can be just as good as that, if not better. The problem is he didn't. The villains that he did bring in were subpar, boring, one note, one-dimensional, and had no real reason to be there. I'm thinking that's why by the time season 12 came around, he realized that if he didn't bring in some more well-known villains like the Master, the Cybermen, and the Daleks, that things were going to get bad. So, in particular, many of Chibnall's choices have directly echoed an era so disliked that the show was cancelled a few years after it ended, that of Colin Baker's Sixth Doctor. Whittaker has become the Sixth Doctor, and Chibnall has shown himself to be very similar to the producer of the show at the time, John Nathan Turner. Yes, this is true. The ratings at the time when Colin Baker was the Doctor, the first season was not that great. His version of the Doctor was rude, angry, a bit psychotic. It did improve in the second season of his run, but by that time the ratings had slipped so vastly that they fired him so quickly that he didn't even get a chance to film his own regeneration scene. They had to bring in a double to take his place when he regenerated into Sylvester McCoy. By the time that Sylvester McCoy showed up, the production values were so subpar, and they had so little money to work with, and not even great story, not even somewhat decent storylines could rescue it. And within just a couple of years of McCoy playing the Doctor, the show was, canceled. Placing the classic and new eras alongside one another demonstrates similar development. After reasonably successful early Doctors, being 3, 4, 5, 2, the shows found global success in the Tom Baker 1974 to 1981 and Matt Smith 2010 to 2014 eras, respectively. I will disagree when you say Matt Smith, but I'm sure that they're citing Matt Smith in this instance because he was the one that was able to break the show into the U.S. market. But the show definitely reached its golden age with David Tennant. Period. The only reason that I think people give Matt Smith the credence that they give him is because, as I said previously, he was able to break the show into the U.S. market, which previously they weren't really able to do. But honestly, I chalk that up more to the fact that there is a clause in the actors' contracts previous to Matt Smith that would not allow actors portraying the Doctor to appear at any Comic-Cons or convention gatherings. It wasn't until David Tennant was at the end of his run, and was pretty much done filming anyway, that they allowed him to appear, and this is when, more Doctor Who panels started to become more commonplace. Tom Baker went on to become the iconic image of the Doctor in the popular culture, until David. Matt Smith turned the show into a franchise. I guess you could say that that's true, because like I said, he broke the show into the US, shooting episodes in the United States for the first time. Yeah, that's great. He did, but they weren't that good. That's the thing. These Doctors were succeeded respectively by excellent actors betrayed by wildly uneven writing, Peter Davison and Peter Capaldi. They both started out strong, but then the writing got uneven, which was to the detriment of the actors, both of whom were fantastic, but unfortunately were victims of, as it says, writing that wasn't very good. Subsequent rating slumps, in turn, turned the showrunners to take a radical shift, spurred the showrunners to take a radical shift in approach, thus Colin Baker and Jodie Whittaker. So yeah, by the time that we got to Dr. 12, the ratings started to really shift radically downward. And this was when Moffat was ready to leave. So the BBC knew that if they were going to bring in somebody else to take over, they needed to do something radically different to keep longtime fans there and to bring in new fans. So Chibnall would only sign on to be the executive producer and showrunner if he was able to cast a female as the Doctor. Right there off the bat. If you're doing it as a social justice thing for representation, that's a problem. If you're only picking actors because they fit a category of some skin tone, because that person is black or that person is Muslim or this person is blind or whatever, and not based on the actor's merits and ability, you have a serious problem, because you're going to get subpar actors who are filling a slot. And that's only to the detriment of the episode itself. That happened quite a bit from what I could see in seasons 11 and 12. You had a lot of background characters and even a lot of main characters who were subpar at best because they were filling a slot. These Doctors, both Baker and Whittaker played boldly different iterations of the main character. Baker was violent and unpleasant, at least in the first series of his run. Whittaker was, well, the first female. Both are blonde and wear sexless rainbow-themed outfits. But the most significant similarities between the two are in how their eras prioritized dense, self-referential mythology and a misunderstanding of what the show at heart is all about. Well, I can't argue there. Now, I will say, most Doctor Who fans know for a fact that the outfit that Colin Baker wore was supposed to be a joke when they were trying to decide what the Sixth Doctor would wear, and they never actually intended for that to go through, for that to actually happen. But somehow it did. Mythology. Let's start with the mythology problem. As the show grows older, it begins to include callbacks. Eventually, there are whole episodes that you won't get if you don't remember that one time in that Pompeii episode in season 4 when that side character was played by Peter Capaldi. It's an easy temptation to coast off goodwill from earlier seasons and worldwide recognition without risking new angles. Who needs to reestablish a show's basics when your show has been a global hit for a decade? That's exactly what happened in the 1980s. Following Tom Baker's wildly popular tenure in the TARDIS, the BBC brought on a new show runner, John Nathan Turner. He turned out episodes like Attack of the Cybermen, which was chock full of references to serials from 20 years before, missing serials to boot. Many of the episodes in his era didn't seem to really know what show they were in, aping formulas from earlier seasons, and Nathan Turner assumed the audience was already attached to the Doctor, so he moved the character to the center of the show. Okay, now if anybody has watched previous seasons of the show, at least up to the latter half of David Tennant, you'll know that the Peter Capaldi reference is talking about fires of Pompeii, one of the early episodes in season 4. Everybody knows that Peter Capaldi has played 3 different characters in the Doctor Who verse. That character in Fires of Pompeii, another character named Frobisher in Torchwood, and, of course, the 12th Doctor. Now, what makes what Moffat did by casting Capaldi different from what Turner did is the fact that when Peter Capaldi was cast to play 12, it was only a couple of years after what happened in season 4 with David Tennant. People still remembered that he played that particular character. And it was also only a couple years since he had played Frobisher in Torchwood. So making that full circle made sense. Now, with what Nathan Turner did, putting in references from serials from 2 decades past that most people probably wouldn't remember unless they are totally diehard fans, it's probably not the best idea. Because if you have an entire episode that is contingent on you knowing the small and infinitesimal details, people are going to tune out because they're not going to have any idea what you're talking about. If you want to include some callbacks, that's fine, but at least make it something that is a little more current. Nothing that goes back farther than like 5 years at a stretch. Because anything more than that, people might not necessarily remember. At first, Chibnall tried to make a clean break with earlier seasons, refusing to use old monsters. He swung dramatically back the other way in his second season, but the entire structure of the story assumes the audience is already on his side. Many of the episodes of his tenure, especially those written by him, are thinly cobbled together out of tropes we've seen a million times. Because Chibnall assumes the audience is there to watch the Doctor, he makes her the audience stand-in instead of the companions. Exactly. So he cobbles together a bunch of crap, which you can see because most of the villains in his episodes are one note. They don't really have any development or motivation of their own, so they have no character arc. The companions have even less of an arc, and most of the action is completely centered on the Doctor and how she reacts to everything. And that's not how the show was supposed to go. If it's all focused on the Doctor, then what the hell are the companions even there for? The companions are supposed to be the audience stand-in. You're supposed to be seeing the universe through their eyes because they're human and so are you. You're supposed to be seeing how they react to the Doctor and all her wacky craziness through their eyes. You're supposed to be viewing the TARDIS for the first time through their eyes, not hers, because she's been in the TARDIS for 9 fucking centuries. She knows what it looks like and what it can do. The companions don't. So, here we go. When the 13th Doctor's TARDIS appears for the first time, the camera follows Whittaker inside for this new experience. Then the companions come along later. Yeah, I did not watch the episode Ghost Monument, but I have seen that little clip when she walks in. Why? Okay, the TARDIS has a new desktop. Whoopie fucking do. It gets a new desktop every time we get a new Doctor. That's nothing new. When we see the new desktop theme or how new that the TARDIS looks, it's supposed to be seen through the eyes of the companion. Because if you remember back to Russell's days, the first time Rose went in there, the first time Martha, Donna, even Jack, who's from the 51st century and has been on probably every spaceship imaginable, and who wouldn't think twice about being in something that's bigger on the inside, even he was astounded. But it's seen through their eyes, their imagination, their wonder. We don't need to see it through her eyes. It's her fucking ship. She's been in there for 900 years. She knows what it does. All right, moving on. That's an important distinction because the discovery of the TARDIS is that the TARDIS is bigger on the inside is magical precisely because it is foreign to the human beings who stumble inside. It's an entire paradigm shift for them. Their world is suddenly bigger. Their horizon of possibilities widened. It is Lucy entering the wardrobe, not Aslan. Yes. I distinctly remember in the episode Rose, her running into the TARDIS for the first time and not even having no idea what she was even looking at. And being so terrified that, what is this place? And just running straight out because she couldn't even believe that it was real. And then in season 3, when Martha first went in and that logical Doctor mind of her just couldn't process, there's no way that this thing could have this much in here. It's just too small. And she just walked around the whole thing like, what is this? That's what you want to see. That's what makes it magical. Both Nathan Turner and Chibnall tried to inject some life into the show after weak first years by introducing heavily metatextual seasons, which further ensconced the Doctor as the center of the narrative. To be fair, both seasons were dramatic improvement. Well, that remains to be seen. That can be argued. But not exactly what you'd call good. In Classic Who, the Doctor is put on trial by the Time Lords and is shown by the Master a previously unknown incarnation of himself. This would be the Valiant, if I'm right. And then there was the half-completed Andrew Cartmel Penn storyline, which was meant to uncover that the Doctor was involved in the very creation of Gallifrey itself. Yeah, this is the one that Chibnall decided to pick up off the floor and use in conjunction with the Morbius storyline as his motivation for the Timeless Children. Even though it's already been proven that the faces in the Morbius thing were the faces of Morbius, not the Doctor. But anyway, Chris Chibnall used a mashup of those storylines to create the Timeless Child twist in the latest season of the show, revealing that the Doctor is the origin of her entire race's ability to regenerate, with the Master introducing a previously unknown incarnation of the Doctor, that being the Ruth one. The similarity between the two arcs is striking, not least because it is the mark of a creatively exhausted story to become obsessed with origins and nostalgia and backstory over character, allowing its protagonist to navel-gaze endlessly until audiences finally give up in frustration. Credit where it's due, this is definitely a trend started by Steven Moffat. Yes! Yes! Because in season 6, we got that whole blue face in the box. What is your name, Doctor Who? You know, that's that whole mythos surrounding who the Doctor truly was, what his real name was, and the fact that once he gets to Trenzalore, it is his name that gives the signal to the Time Lords that it's safe for them to return, blah, 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 blah. Totally missing the point. The whole reason that the show has lasted as long as it has is because the Doctor is supposed to remain a mystery and ambiguous. We have only gotten information and backstory about him in bits and pieces, and that is the way it should remain. If you have everything up front about him all at once, what the fuck is the point of even watching? There's nothing else for you to learn because you already know everything. So now, no longer is he this incredibly eccentric man who travels through space and time in a blue box and has adventures and saves people and makes people better. He's Space Jesus, who can never die. And there goes your dramatic and emotional weight. Because nothing matters. You don't have to worry about people dying anymore. The Doctor can save you with his endless font of regeneration energy. And if Jodie doesn't do that, then she's a heifer, right? Because she's being selfish. All right, next up. The focus on the Doctor as the protagonist has the side effect of producing boring stock companions. In 2018, Whittaker's new companions were a trio, each from a distinct underrepresented demographic in the show's companion history. Black and disabled, at least for the first two episodes of the first season, and then it kind of disappeared. Elderly, British, Asian. None of the three has developed far beyond that. They sort of suggest character traits, but they're all external or obvious. Ryan struggles with dyspraxia, Graham misses his dead wife, Yaz exists. Basically. This too is the show's history repeating itself. Nathan Turner was interested in catering to a certain demographic groups among fans. Thus, the Fifth Doctor's 3 new companions were a nerdy fan stand-in, an Australian, and traditional female sidekick, just so things didn't get too radical. This was Adric, Tegan, and Nyssa. And if any of you have ever seen Classic Who, you all know what happened with those 3. Adric got barely any storyline whatsoever and was sidelined almost half of the time. And the other 2 didn't last long before they both left. And weren't really given that much character development beyond what they were on the surface. They didn't have the time. There was too many of them. You can't devote entire episodes to just one character. That's what Chibnall tried to do with, the whole Demons of the Punjab thing for Yaz, and for the lingering storyline with Graham's wife, and then trying to shoehorn in Ryan's dad, trying to be a better guy, but at the same time when he shows up to take him out to eat, he tries to sell a microwave to the person at the restaurant. Like, what even is this? None of these three characters have any real depth, any real motivation, or any real storyline that gives them any emotional beats. They're just kind of there. Worse off is the fact that they don't call the doctor out on her shit. They just sit there and let her do whatever she wants. They just let everything roll off them. Like, nothing that they have seen affects them in any way. I distinctly remember back in the first season, episode 2, End of the World, the doctor takes Rose all the way to near 5 billion apple, whatever, to see the destruction of Earth. And for someone who's never been out of London ever, this innocent 19-year-old girl, to see her own planet, her home where her mother lives and her boyfriend just destroyed, it emotionally affects her because that's her home. That's all she knows. So by the time that the episode's over, all she wants is, she doesn't necessarily want to leave, but she just wants to go home to make sure that it's still there, that she can still feel the ground beneath her feet. And when they initially walk to the station, to where all the aliens are gathered, this is the first time that she's ever seen an alien in her life. She didn't even know that they existed before this, except for the autons, but they were running so much during that she really didn't have a chance to process. Once she gets to just sit back and talk to these people without them trying to kill her, she's overwhelmed because, oh my God, you know? But each of the companions had their own overarching story. Each one of them developed. Rose went from being just a normal shop girl with not very much aspirations in life to becoming one of the strongest characters on the show. Martha went from a medical student who wasn't entirely confident with what she could do to an amazing doctor who worked for Torchwood and Unit and who walked the earth for an entire year spreading the doctor story and saved her life, saved the doctor's life and the lives of everyone on that planet single-handedly. And Donna. Do I even have to describe Donna? The most important woman in the whole of creation? I mean, she was just a temp who thought that she was worthless, but she became the most important person in the universe. Not because of some crazy overarching storyline that said she was born to save the doctor. No, because she was brave to do something that no one else had ever done. To save the doctor's life. To save not just him, but everybody. But they still had lasting and profound effects from this. When Martha's family was tortured by the Master in season 3, she had to leave after that because she needed to be with her family to make sure they were okay. It affected her in a not so great way. And then you had Donna, whose mind was wiped because if it wasn't, she would have burned having a Time Lord consciousness in there. And even Rose. Rose went from being innocent and carefree and full of joy to becoming a hardened soldier who looked to me like she had lost a part of her soul when she lost him. And hopefully has gotten it back now that she's with 10-2. But each of the characters, each of the companions had that overarching storyline, had that character development, had those emotional beats, and also weren't afraid to call the doctor out on their shit whenever he did something wrong. These ones just kind of sit there and just let it roll like it's nothing, and nothing really affects them. All the death that they've seen, the war, the people dying, nothing seems to affect them other than Graham's loss of his wife and the alien that killed her. Nothing else really seems to, emotionally affect them. They're just kind of there. This, too, is the show's history repeating itself. Okay, let's see. An Australian and the traditional female sidekick, just so things didn't get too radical. Each of the companions failed to evolve beyond those types, and things didn't get any better with the Sixth Doctor, who had an American and a health nut companion. It wasn't a problem with diverse casting so much as thinking in types instead of individuals. That's a big problem with the direction that this show has gone in. I've heard a lot of people saying when you cast people based on making marks off a checklist instead of based off of merit and talent and ability to do the role. And it's not just the companions, it's the side characters, it's the Doctor herself. You're choosing Jodie Whittaker based on the fact that she's female, not based on her ability to play the role. Not saying that she's not a good actress. She is. But just because you're a good actress does not mean that you have the ability to play. Okay. Lack of vision. These decisions illustrate a basic lack of vision. Both Nathan Turner and Chibnall approach storytelling not like artists, but like producers. Everything they put forth is a surface reading, a magpie patchwork quilt of tropes established by other writers but assembled with no insider understanding. It doesn't help that both showrunners chose to bring in writers with no previous experience on Doctor Who. Their work is all imitation. Ironically, Chibnall once appeared on television, as I had said before, at age 16, lambasting Nathan Turner's program. So the very things that Chibnall was lambasting Nathan Turner for doing when he ran the show back in the 70s and 80s is exactly what Chibnall's doing to the show now. Chibnall himself has only written maybe 4 or 5 episodes, and most of them were not that good. So he has decided to employ writers who had not just no experience with Doctor Who, but very little experience with sci-fi in general and this type of genre. So the most that they can do is throw in little tidbits of things that they already know based on what they've written before and steal other things from past episodes. That's why it looks coupled together. They don't know what they're doing. Take the use of metatextual references. In earlier seasons of the show, metatextual references were woven intelligently into the story's flow. Tom Baker's reference to his previous companion, Victoria, comes off to casual viewers like he's name-dropping, meaning the Queen of England, as he often did, but to older fans, the callback adds depth to his ruminations about being middle-aged. In the Russell T. Davies years, bringing back Tom Baker, era companion Sarah Jane Smith fit perfectly with the second season's hintings at the Doctor's disloyalty. If he was such great friends with his current companion Rose, then who was this woman from his past? But Chibnall brings things back that older fans will get, but that don't really enhance the narrative. Who is this Captain Jack? Great example. They didn't just bring in Sarah Jane just to have her there and then blip out with no real consequence. She was there to demonstrate the fact that Rose had to understand that she wasn't the only person he's ever traveled with. Up until that point, her relationship with the Doctor was so intrinsic that she didn't really understand that. She didn't really grasp that there was other people there before her, and that there were reasons why he didn't go as far as she would like him to go with her. And having Sarah Jane there and seeing what happens when you get left behind and how much that affects your life, and the fact that he had been with her for a long time and then left her, didn't come back. She waited for him for 30 years and he never mentioned her once. It has a big effect on the overarching story. Now, I've seen the clip when they bring in Barrowman as Captain Jack. I was initially really excited because I love Jack. But why are you bringing him in when none of the companions will even know who the fuck he is? And he's literally there for like 5 seconds to drop a plot point for something that happens in the Timeless Child, which could have been dropped by anybody else. And then he leaves. It is so shoehorned in, and it's almost a waste of Barrowman's time and talent. If they had had characters there that knew who he was, or if the story, or if the reason for him being there was a little more than just a 5-second cameo, that had some emotional beat to it, something necessary to the plot of that particular episode, it might have made more sense. But as it was, he didn't even get the chance to see the Doctor herself. He saw the companions, mistook Graham for the Doctor because Graham was the older male, and then when he realized that they were just the companions and not the Doctor, he dropped the little morsel that they needed and then blipped out. It was like, what was even the point? You wasted a perfectly good chance to have him back for nothing. Even the Doctor's clothes illustrate this shallowness. Both Nathan Turner and Chibnall put the Doctor in something that looks more like a costume than an outfit. In the 6th and 13th Doctor's cases, these costumes are sexless and neutral, disconnected from any sort of cultural characteristics that can help place the Doctor's personality. By contrast, the 3rd Doctor was a swashbuckling dandy, wearing a selection of velvet smoking jackets, frilly shirts, and usually a cape. The 10th Doctor was a bouncy techno-geek with a dashing trench coat and Converse tennis shoes. The 12th, a hip professor in sweats and shades, and also a magician and Victorian gentleman. His character arc could have used some focusing. There were ideas behind these costumes. The 6th Doctor looks like a circus tent threw up on him. And the 13th Doctor's costume is carefully neutral, suggesting neither masculine nor feminine influences, a sterile and safe set of ugly clothes. Basically. That I can only chalk up to Chibnall and the BBC not wanting to offend anybody. That's one of the bigger problems. They don't want to offend anybody with anything. So they make her as carefully neutral and bland and dishwater as possible. That's only to the detriment of the character overall. Because there's nothing that she wears that really identifies her as the Doctor. If you were to blot her out and just have a silhouette of her, you would never know that she was connected to any of them. All the other, even Colin Baker's atrocious jacket, as she said, making it look like a circus tent, even that stands out somewhat as clownish enough so you know, yes, that's Colin Baker. Hers is so neutral and bland that she could be any one of the side characters on the show and never really stand out. It's bad enough the fact that she has no real character arc and no distinct personality of her own. She just picks the best bits that she wants from Tennant and Smith, which irks me to no end, because that's their stuff. Even down to the fact that she uses "I'm so sorry" and other choice bits from them that she really shouldn't be stealing. How to fix it? Poor Colin Baker, who loved the show, was the only Doctor ever to be fired by the BBC. He didn't even turn up to regenerate, and they had to work with a stand-in in a blonde wig. This despite the fact that he became more interesting and complex in his 2nd season, like Whittaker, and the show had tried more off-the-wall things, like The Timeless Child. Not that that was very helpful. I don't think Whittaker is in any danger of that, and I hope not. Like Baker, she's grown into the role? Oh, I don't think she has. But the only way that Doctor Who can make itself interesting again is to rediscover what the heart of the show really is. To find the telos, which is the point, the reason behind it all, of Doctor Who. Here's a hint. It's not about ever more complex revelations of the Doctor's origins. And it sure as hell isn't about social justice warrior bullshit. That does not belong on this show. If you want to be progressive, fine, but be subtle about it. Having entire episodes devoted to racism, sexism, climate change, plastics, Amazon, and capitalism, not necessary. Those are not good episodes. They are boring and nobody cares about them. We don't want to be lectured. We want to be entertained. It's about human beings, usually, who stumble through a door into fairy, guided by a batty old man or woman who can never reveal his name. Writers should pull on literary tropes with understanding. Remember, the Doctor can be Peter Pan, Merlin, Santa Claus, and a mad scientist all rolled into one. Remember that she's an ancient character and not your best pal. Doctor Who is an unanswerable question, so stop dwelling on it. Yes, his identity is supposed to be ambiguous. Always ambiguous. That's part of what makes the show last as long as it does, and what the attraction is never truly knowing all of his or her secrets. Hire Doctor Who writers. They get it. One of the things which made the new show so successful in the early 2000s is that it pulled from an established stable of writers who had written excellent audio dramas during the 1990s. Robert Shearman, Paul Cornell, although not so much now, Toby Whithouse, Neil Gaiman, and new blood like Jamie Matheson and Sarah Dollard. They're all out there. Yes, all of these writers wrote some of the best episodes in the early show's history. And fortunately, Moffat kept quite a few of them going when he took over. That's why not every episode he wrote was bad, just his overarching story arcs. The great thing about Doctor Who is that no character is unsalvageable. I'm immensely fond of Colin Baker's Doctor Now. He made a triumphant return to fans' good graces in the 1990s when he starred in a series of audio adventures written by fans turned writers, revising his role and reputation. From adventures in post-apocalyptic Dalek-ruled worlds to rewriting Gilbert and Sullivan on a pirate ship, he turned in classic after classic, but this time the Sixth Doctor was more like a pompous old retiree traveling the universe with his spunky history teacher companion. There was an idea there, and that made all the difference. So, yeah, that's the article, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I think that the writers and the showrunner have kind of lost the focus of what the show is supposed to be about, and it really saddens me because the show used to be something that I was so excited to watch day after, week after week. Yes, I kind of lost the love after Tennant left, but I was still willing to give it a chance. And then things just went continuously downhill. I had even thought after Moffat left that whoever was going to take over next might be able to make things better, more cohesive, more sensical. And then I saw 2 episodes that I could not even believe made it to screen. Honestly, I don't even know what to say anymore. The ratings and Rotten Tomatoes and all those critic scores pretty much speak for itself. If they don't do something to fix it now, there's not going to be a show left. Because even if they get rid of Jodie and bring in somebody else, it will only be a matter of time before the ratings drop so profusely that it will not be worth BBC's time to keep it going. And that would be a damn shame, because this show has been an institution. And the only reason it was able to resurge the way it did was because of Russell. I don't think there'd be anybody else that could bring it back a third time. At least not to where he did it. If it goes down in flames this time, I really do fear that will be the end for this great show. And it saddens me because it shouldn't be. It should not have gotten to this point. But, oh well, this has already gone on long enough. So, if you guys have any opinions or anything, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Do try to be, reasonable. I don't want to be flamed or anything. I know that this is a divisive topic. But I will talk to you guys later when I have more Doctor Who news, or whenever I decide to make another video. All right? Peace out, guys. See you later.